Welcome to the Marketing Stir podcast by Stirista, where we chat with industry leaders and get their take on the challenges facing the market. And maybe we'll have a little fun along the way.
On this week's episode of the Marketing Stir podcast, Ajay and Vincent welcome Sharalyn Orr, Global Marketing and Innovation Leader at Estée Lauder, to discuss their efforts towards a more diverse consumer base, as well as some of the common missteps companies make when trying to reach multiple generations.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello. It is me, Vincent Petrofessa, the Vice President of B2B Products here at Stirista, but one of the co-hosts of the Marketing Stir. You know me, you crazy kids out there. This is another episode. I'm so happy for this episode for a variety of reasons. What a killer guest. Killer brand, killer guest. Feel like I know him, right? You hear me say that sometimes, not all the time, but doesn't mean that after the podcast, I feel like now we know him. But we also have my co-host joining us. We'll get to him in a moment. We have a lot to catch up on. But if your first time listening to the podcast, we're the Marketing Stir from Stirista, stirring things up. Who are we? Who is Stirista? We are a marketing technology company. We own our own business-to-business data, business-to-consumer data. Through our technology, we'll help you get new customers, get to that data through our own email platform, demand-side platform. Email me, Vincent@Stirista.com. That is how confident I am. I just gave you my email address. Boy, do you use it. Not always for intention, but hey, you're listening. I'll take it. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, he is back. He was very busy, but now he is back. He's always traveled. He was in Miami, this guy, but he's here today. Love seeing him. My co-host, Mr. AJ Gupta. What's up, AJ?
Hey, Vincent. Yeah, it's been a little while. I think I missed the last couple of recordings, so excited to be back. And then on top of that, we got 7 or 8 boxes of crumble cookies delivered to our office this morning.
Well, it's not every day you get a crumble cookie delivered, and it's in San Antonio. So even I, listeners, aren't getting any of that cookie, but it is a good day. But yeah, we've both been busy. You were at Possible, right, in Miami. That was a good show. Tell people about that. What'd you like about that show?
Yeah, possible. I don't want to tell them too much because it's almost grown too big. So we had a hard time finding spots to sit. So I liked it last year more, where fewer people knew about it. But no, they've done a great job. 3 years ago, the show didn't exist, and now they had, I think, 6,500 people in a single hotel. So yeah, it was a great show, and you can't beat the location of Miami on the beach.
Yeah, no, I heard great things about it. I was not in Miami, but I was at a very cool show myself. I was at the World of DaaS, Data as a Service. 150 people, not nearly the size, but like intimate, where people are joking, having great conversations. It was, former podcast guest Oren Hoffman, he started it. We saw a lot of former podcast guests. Gretchen Littlefield was there. We had Manny Iyer from, so it was kind of like a little reunion there, but really cool, really intimate. Check them out, World of DaaS. I had to tell them that I was the interim general manager. They say, well, didn't you have that title for 5 years now? I'm like, yes, I'm always going to be interim, right? Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. But it was fun, a good time. Check them out. Neither of these we don't get anything out of it. In fact, we pay to go to these things, but it's okay. That's what we do for you, the good people listening, is if we see something we like, we talk about it. AJ, we have an amazing episode today. Again, like I said, we're talking to the Estée Lauder companies. You know me, I love my products. I do, right? I probably have more products than my wife. My wife, very simple, right? With her makeup routine, not very simple, but she's an amazing woman. So she uses some of these products. She uses the Clinique line. Me, I have a very rigorous routine that people over the years have been asking me about. Maybe we'll get into it. Maybe Sharalyn and I will talk about it, but we have an amazing perspective today. Executive Director, Global Marketing Innovation, Sharalyn Orr. What's going on, Sharalyn?
Hey, Vincent, thank you so much for having me. And we're definitely going to need to hear about your nightly routine.
And I love your advice on it before we start getting into questions. And for those of you, like, people have been asking me this for years, and I really haven't. I was almost going to do a video on it comedically,
Get ready.
just to do like a bit. AJ's face, he's dying right now. So what I do, you should see my shaving routine. So let's go through some of the things, right? In the shower, I have a sensitive skin cleansing serum, if you will. Cleans the face, right? And then, of course, I'm going with the soap. I get out of the shower, I'm going moisturizer on the face and the neck. Here's the thing that people forget, Sharalyn, the neck. I don't want old neck, so I do a moisturizer on that. And that's it. However, let me talk to you about my shaving routine. All sensitive skin. I have very sensitive skin. I'm a sensitive guy. Why not have sensitive skin? So I use a pre-shave gel, oil. I use a sensitive skin shaving cream with the brush. You got to open up those pores, AJ. I shave my face. I then use rubbing alcohol, which probably is, no product. You're probably not supposed to do. But then I use an aftershave sensitive skin balm, and I put that on, and then the moisturizer still goes on. That's the routine.
That's a pretty good routine. I know those brushes are fun. I gave one to my husband when we were dating, and he got a very big kick out of that. But you should know, Clinique has a really great men's shaving line. I have colleagues' husbands who swear by it. I haven't gotten mine to try it yet.
No, well, I will go and try it and I use an under eye cream at night, and that's why. That's why, AJ, there's sometimes this glow when people ask me, "Where's your glow?" No one really asks me that, but in my head they do. But let's get into it. I told you we're gonna have some fun, Sharalyn. We're having some fun here. Talk to us though. People know Estée Lauder for a variety of reasons, but tell people about the organization, your role, global innovation. Love to hear more about that. What are you doing day to day there?
So I'm part of a team. The technical name of our team is the Global Local and Cultural Innovation Team. Say that 3 times fast. But what it really is about is helping our brands show up for underserved consumers in a better way. So it's comprised of 2 COEs. We have a COE that's focused on skin of color. So how do we create better products for multi-ethnic people across the globe and, represent them better in our creative? And then the one that I lead is called Ageless Innovation. And what that is focused on is how do we better serve consumers over the age of 45? And why this really was so interesting to me and why I really truly love it is I love the juxtaposition, right? How do we serve women over the age of 45 in an industry that is notorious for being focused on youth and for portraying beauty as equaling youth, for portraying the pursuit of beauty as being only the pursuit of youth. And so I'm trying to help our brands evolve much further past that into a much more modern face that's incredibly inclusive.
I love that. And I, such important areas to focus on for something like that. Like you said, people of color where there's different variations, right? And also over 45 that's my demographic. But, and it's different because I think you and I were joking about it, where living in New York City, you see the difference, 45 and over, the makeup's still there. They're, elegant, simple, right? For work. And then you see, like in New York, the 20 somethings on Sunday brunch. I'm like, that is a full face you have on right now. That is a lot of, you're like going to the prom. This is insane. But
they call it a full beat. Now you'll know next time. I like your beat.
Oh, that's hilarious. And it's like, but it's changed. I remember my grandmother with just like the bright red rouge, and now that's changed. Those grandparents now, 60s, 50s, 70s, whatever, they're sophisticated. It's a different time, and I'm getting way into the weeds. I know you're like, how does this guy know so much about? But anyway, I love the cause, love what you're doing. Talk to us how you got started in this industry.
Absolutely. Well, first, I would just want to say I love that what you are is a man that pays attention, and I think that that's incredible. So for that, but across the board, I mean, that's really what we need to be doing as marketers, right? Like paying attention is a fundamental thing for being a marketer. And really how I got my start, it's fun to do this because my start of my career was doing what you're doing, but it was before podcasts. I actually started as a journalist, and I I did newspaper reporting, but then I moved to TV and I was an on-air host and a producer of a daily live television show in a very, very tiny place. And, I did that in college in my first little while out of college. And it's really the place where I learned marketing, which is funny, since my degree is in journalism. But it was a small place in our TV station. One of the core products that we created, where we called them cash clubs. We lived in Cache Valley, so CACHE, not SH, that would be Dosh, but CACHE, and they were basically infomercials at local businesses. And I would host these as this young woman who I don't know, basically knew nothing. And I would go into this local business and I would talk to a business owner, Bryce Bosworth at You and I Furniture, and learn all about different types of furniture, things that no 20-year-old knows. And I got to learn about it. Or sometimes I'd be going to the bank and talking about reverse mortgages and, things that I had no clue about. And it was my job, in live recordings, to learn about them and to help pull someone along the journey. And what's really funny is my old boss, owner of the TV station, he was just this rather eccentric, funny guy. And Earl used to sit back on the couch in the break room, and he would be like, "You're going to look back on life someday and say that you learned everything you needed to know at the Ballet Channel." And I'd always kind of roll my eyes and be like, "Okay, Earl," right? Because you're young and 20 and you think you know everything. And oh my gosh, if he wasn't right. I learned so much there that I didn't even realize I was learning until, as I transitioned in my career and realized I like to be anonymous and I didn't really want to be on air anymore. And I started working on the business side of media, and I realized I knew so much about marketing, even though that wasn't what I technically studied in school. And so the quick thing from there is working in the business side of media, found myself becoming a consumer expert on generational cohorts, ran a generational strategies practice area at a market research firm, started consulting in beauty, and then flash forward and ended up here at the Estée Lauder companies, where I focus on consumer cohorts for beauty brands.
All right, I have to ask you more about the generational cohorts. So what's one myth that people still believe about millennials or Gen Z?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I could wax poetic about this for a while, but the millennial one right now is honestly, it's not so much a myth that gets repeated as it's a myth that I think people believe because no one's saying it. It's that they think that they're just there and they're fine. And they're just they're now in, we just put them on the back burner and they're going to stay warm and it doesn't matter because we need to focus on recruiting the young consumer. And I find it is a very, very alarming thing. I think that brands that ignore millennials, it's at their own peril. And that everything we've seen in history about them prior, they did not behave like previous generations of consumers at that life stage. So there is absolutely nothing that tells me that millennials are going to behave well in terms of what businesses want them to do by being ignored as a consumer. And that's what most brands are doing. So the myth is that they're fine. And it's no, we need to be paying attention to them. They're not just going to take care of themselves.
So often people are equating, when they talk about innovation, it's about tech. But what does that mean to you in this context of beauty?
I love that you point that out. That's kind of one of my, I have many things I'll get on a soapbox about, and this is one of them, that I don't think that tech is the only thing related to innovation. It certainly is an element, but that's not all of it. And, when we talk in beauty, innovation gets used as an umbrella term for basically any sort of new product, right? It could be a mascara that's not super, super differentiated from anything else, but it's called new innovation because it's new. And that's just broadly across our industry. But I really think innovation that's true innovation and that's good innovation and that's innovation that's going to drive sales, which by the way is kind of all of our jobs. It's really going to be about the consumer. The consumer has to be at the heart of all of it when we're talking of innovation. And in my world in beauty, right, there can be packaging innovation, there can be ingredient innovation, formula or form innovation, all of these things. But unless it's been done with the consumer in mind, does it really matter? You may have created the coolest package in the world, but if it's clumsy for the consumer, it doesn't really matter, right? And I think that the term of innovation, it becomes this shiny object that people chase. And so often tech, and right now AI is what everyone's obsessed over, gets used almost interchangeably. And really it just innovation is like forward thinking that's going to move the needle. And I think that's the big difference. It's not just about that it's something new, it's forward thinking, moving the needle with the consumer at the center.
Sharalyn, let's stay on that because you talked about obviously innovation, but cultural innovation, right? One of the areas you're focused on. What does that mean, and what are you currently exploring? You did mention up top some things. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, cultural, I think that that's so profound and so important, especially in today's society, partly because we don't really live in a monolith culture anymore. I mean, one could maybe argue we never did, but it's even less so than it ever has been. And so what our team, when we're our name, right, part of cultural innovation, we're looking at consumers of color all over the world who inherently have their own cultures, and the way that the things that matter to them related to beauty can vary by culture, and how important that is to understand. And what's really interesting on the other side, when I'm talking about from generational cohorts, they're so intrinsically tied to culture because culture shapes generations and generations shape culture. And, I think most anyone can understand that the shared experience you had, right? Like, so Vincent, we're close to the same age. I'm staring down the barrel of 45 later this year. That older millennial Gen X experiences, there's a certain part of culture that you had that's very different than, like what the 20 something in your office may have experienced. And that kind of shapes the way you see the world, and the way that I look at it as, a demographer and as an actual marketer, is like understanding those cultural things and the mindsets that they create. And then one of the things we're exploring more as our team is kind of the intersection of all of these things, right? So how diverse our society, let's use just the US as an example, how diverse we're becoming, right? The generation Z, which, by the way, I didn't really answer you fully, AJ. I mean, a common myth about them is that, it's just teenagers and young adults. But no, actually, like Gen Z, like people make the years too short because we're so quick to want to like label the next thing. Almost everything you see in the news labeled as Gen Alpha, I believe, is fundamentally still Gen Z. And that's a whole thing I can get into about birth rates and a number of things about patterns there. But I really believe Gen Z was born 1997 to 2014, which means, the youngest Gen Z is only turning 11 this year.
My son just turned 11, and he corrected me yesterday because I called him Gen Z, and he's like, I'm a Gen Alpha.
Because that's what they're hearing, right? I mean, that's not an exact science, but this is kind of the way that I look at it. I think it's funny your kid's so tuned in, but and I think that's it's complicated for people to think of it that way, because you've got elementary students, middle school students, high school students, college students, and then young adults, all with the same moniker. And then people are like, but wait, they're different. Anyway, so that's like one myth. But I think exploring that intersection, right? So when we look at Gen Z in the United States, 50% non-white. And immigration laws are going to change over the next little while, but like due to immigration, they will be the first generation to be, less than 50% Caucasian. And Gen Alpha is going to be less than 50% Caucasian. So and going forward, it will continue on that route. And so then it's really about those things like, where do they intersect, and how does that show up, and how do all of these play into the larger culture at large? And it's so present. Just like an example, since we're in New York, we were talking about that, Vincent, right? The Met Gala was just, like 2 weeks ago, and the New York Times ran a poll and had everybody and I think they, in a couple of hours, had something like 30,000 responses to people voting for their favorite outfits. All 10 of the favorite outfits were sported by a person of color. And I think that that's really kind of shows the huge impact that these consumer cohorts have on culture at large. And that's really one of the things that our team really studies.
Well, no, it's a great point. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking of just like my perspective of how I'm witnessing the beauty industry change, because I remember you went into a department store, there was someone who demonstrated. Now there's influencers, there's individuals their own makeup line, there's tutorials out there. And I feel like people have changed that. We're like, maybe people were like dedicated to one brand, now they kind of use a lot. What's a recent insight research that, has kind of changed how you think about the beauty consumer? Am I wrong? Am I right on some of my insights? Would love to hear your thoughts about it.
You were 100% spot on, and it's absolutely changed. It's put more power in the hands of the consumer. Part of it was store models. So, right, you had mentioned the department store, but then along came Sephora, where, you didn't have to have someone help you. Everything was not behind glass counters and everything was clearly labeled with price and things. It just put the more power in the consumer. And then you had YouTube with the videos, and then Instagram, and then TikTok, and the influencer culture. So of course, all that, you're absolutely spot on. That's really changed. What first comes to mind, and frankly, what I want to talk about, is a data point, which is not an insight, but I think that it's really important, that I found that is not surprising to me, but is surprising to most people in my industry. And it's that the most powerful beauty consumer globally is, fun quiz. Who do you think it is? Like, let's, from a generational standpoint, who do you think it is, Vincent and AJ? Do you think it's a Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers? Who do you think is the most powerful beauty consumer globally?
Oh, I think baby boomers.
You think baby boomers? What do you think, AJ?
I would say millennials.
It's Gen X.
My generation. I was gonna
We had the answer in front of us.
I had it, but I was like, baby boomers are like still like they come from that generation where there's like, you did a full beak or full?
They wouldn't call it a beak, but yes, you do the full thing.
As in beak, like BEAK, like
as in like, the beak.
oh, the beak. Oh, full beak. I thought like, like you have the beak, meaning my nose, and you have everything. Okay.
Which one is the least? Is it Gen Z's?
Yes, because they're not spending as much. You think about it, right? Like, most of them are still kids. They don't have spending power, or they're young professionals. They don't have spending power. And boomers, as they've gotten older, they're a little less engaged, more so than previous generations, but still less engaged. That Gen X cohort, which by the way is 46 to 60 in 2025, they're the ones that are spending the most. And over the next 10 years, their global spending, and this is data that was created by found and in a report by World Labs, Nielsen, and Spate. They published this study earlier this year, and their spending is going to increase by 150 billion in the next 10 years. And then in 2034, do you know who takes over that top spot? Not Gen Z, it's your millennials, AJ. And which makes sense, not only from a size perspective, but yes, it's with beauty is let's be honest, it's like not a non-essential, like it's an additive, it's often a hobby for people, something you do to make you feel good about yourself. When you have more disposable income, you have more ability to invest in that sort of thing. And who tends to have more disposable income? Someone who is older. And so I think that that's a really important thing. And even though this was not surprising to me, I was so thrilled to see these are hard numbers that you can't argue with, and that it's really critical to win with this consumer because they're the ones that are spending the money.
Are you a millennial, AJ? What are you?
I am a millennial. It's like the much maligned generation until the Gen Zs came along, and now we are getting some respect.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's how it always works, right? Like, we always love to pick on the youngest. Like in, Gen X, they were slackers when they were early in, their careers, and now they're kind of widely seen and perceived as incredibly hardworking. You ever just love to dog on like the youngest people. I call myself a millennial. I'm not a millennial, I'm a millennial. Like, I'm right on the cusp between the two. And so there's parts of myself that I feel that are very millennial, and parts that I might go, yeah, I'm super Gen X.
So what are some of the trends that you're seeing that's going to shape the future of beauty marketing?
Well, one of the ones right now that I see that I'm the most excited about is just beauty and women's sports, beauty and sports in general. It's been popping up a lot. I'm very proud to say that one of our brands, the Estée Lauder brand, was one of the first jumping right in that. My incredibly brilliant colleagues that lead marketing for the Estée Lauder North America team, they've had this incredibly successful campaign called Game Day Your Way, and they focus on fandom out of sports. So not just like the athletes, which, everyone's kind of seen since the Olympics and things, but they focus on fandom. When you go to a game, it's an event, it's a social event. You want to look good, you want to feel good when you're there, and how that's part of the game day experience, and you get to control that your way. And then, beyond my brands, and some of you may have heard, it was just announced recently that Sephora is a founding sponsor of the Golden State Valkyries, which is the new WNBA team, and they have the Sephora training center. Like, I used to live near Oakland, so it's kind of funny. I'm like, wow, they're gonna have a Sephora like performing center. Like, that's pretty cool. I mean, any of you had seen the new Netflix series, Mindy Kaling series, and it's with Kate Hudson called Running Point. And there's like a Sephora storyline where Sephora becomes the named like jersey sponsor on an NBA team. So I just think we're going to be seeing more and more of women in sports, and beauty is a natural partnership there that I think is exciting.
That's pretty cool. I play a lot of tennis, and probably tennis is one sport where all of our mixed doubles women are probably some of the best dressed and best makeup outside of Vincent that I know. So, this is one of the questions we love to ask all of our guests. It's a fun one. I'm sure you get a lot of LinkedIn messages trying to sell you something, but what's a message that gets a response from you, and what's one that would really annoy you?
So I'll start with the annoyed, because the opposite is basically what gets my response. And it stems from the fact that I've done cold outreach like for most of my career. And so I try to be very cognizant and get back to people, because I know what that's like. A no is better than the ether. I've like to just go to a black hole. So I try to be very cognizant of that. But because of that, I get really annoyed when it's very clear that they don't even know like what I do. It's not clear what they're pitching. They just connect and don't have any sort of reason. I'm always going to ignore that. And one of my favorites is like least favorites. When I say favorites, I mean like not favorites. Lately that I've been seeing is they start out with, I'm so impressed with what you've done at blah, blah, blah. And it's so clear that they have no idea what I have done or what I am doing. I'm like, don't do an insincere flattery. Like, flattery, I mean, let's be honest, with most humans, it'll get you somewhere, but it's got to be like you've at least done a little bit of work in it. The biggest thing that always gets my attention, though, is it's like you have something that's interesting, that's unique, and you've actually succinctly like presented that to me. And if you didn't spell it out, I can immediately see where this might be a fit for one of my brands. And, then when my role, I'm not on a brand, then I like to partner and like, okay, you know what, this is something really interesting for Tom Ford, or maybe this is really interesting for Clinique. I'll try to then get them connected to the right people if it's something that's the right fit.
Yeah, I knew it was gonna be something nice. I'm like, Sharalyn seems too nice to, just like be super mean to someone. That's awesome. We love that answer. We ask every one of our guests that question. If we forget it, our listeners will let us know. I think we maybe forgot it once, AJ, and it was like an uproar. I'm like, wow, people have a lot of time on their hands. Anyway, Sharalyn, before we get into the personal side of getting to know you, I'd love to hear a favorite campaign you worked on, some cool stuff that you've done. Maybe it was commercial wise, maybe it was print, maybe it's something coming up. What were you excited about? What are you getting excited about? Would love to learn more about that.
Oh, well, I think one of the most exciting things that I've had the chance to work on since I've been at Estée Lauder company is a really, it's more than a campaign. It's really more of a movement, more of a platform for the Estée Lauder brand called Because of My Age. And it's really centered on, again, that 45 plus consumer who, Vincent, you're not running into this because, well, you do skincare and you are a man. But what happens a lot when you're older as a woman is if you're given a compliment, it's particularly anything related to your appearance, it's always with the caveat, well, for your age. So it's not just like you look good, it's, oh, well, you look good for your age, right? And so what this is about was turning that on its head, and that, no, it's not that I look good for my age, I look good because of my age, or I feel whatever because of my age. And it's been a global created that has been running across the West. So I've been working with our regions in the UK and across EMEA and North America to bring this to life. And one of the most exciting things was a global ambassador. We brought Paulina Porskova back to the brand after 30 years as the global face of this. And, she's more than just a face. She's a spokesperson. She has been talking about essentially this message without saying those, 4 words, because of my age, for years now, particularly since her book. And so we've been partnering with her, and it's been very exciting. And the response from just the general public when they see it, the comments we see on social, like it really matters to women. Like they're feeling seen by this, and that it's not just, it doesn't feel performative. It doesn't feel like this is just something you're doing because this is what everybody else is doing, because like very few people are doing. And it's not just about a product, it's about a feeling, which really, that's essentially what beauty is at the end of the day. I mean, you use products because it makes you feel a certain way. You know, there's some that are more utilitarian than anything, like an SPF. We were joking about that, Vincent, right? But you know, the reason a woman puts on foundation or makeup is because it's the way that it makes her feel. And so I love this campaign because it's so centered in that. And there's a lot of ways that this can continue and will continue to show up.
Are there certain countries or cultures that surprise you how they use makeup or don't use it makeup? What I'm getting at is like I've been to some countries in Europe where I feel that they do less with makeup, right? And you know, they let maybe the clothes speak for that. I don't know. It's just like there's so many like nuances of this question, but you know, are there other like countries that view makeup in a different way or use less of it, or different products like that shock you or surprise you?
But I don't know about the shock. I mean, I've definitely gotten to learn more since joining ELC. I previous roles have been very, very US centric, whether beauty or entertainment, whatever, has been very US centric. But you're right, in like Europe, like makeup isn't as big as it is, you know, North America is very much a makeup market. Like India is very much a makeup market. Latin America is very much a makeup market. And China has become so. It wasn't initially, but it's really grown in popularity there too. Korea's always been a makeup market. So it does vary by your region. And again, that's also why it's so important that, you know, as a marketer, trying to bring it back to who's listening, you know, partnering with your insights teams to really understand those nuances of the markets. And when you are in that global role, that you trust your regional partners to tell you the truth, right? And to really know and understand their region. I do think that that is part of the challenge of a modern marketer in these global roles, that, you know, there's always going to be the nuances, but I also really believe that there's a lot of things that connect us more across the globe than there used to be, because our world's inherently smaller because of social media and the internet.
Sharalyn, tell us what you like to do for fun. You're an East Coaster now, where you used to be a West Coast, and now you're here to tell, and then what you like to do for fun, your hobbies on the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, I have 2 small children, so hobbies are not super existent days, but my husband and I love to hike, and now we can finally drag the kids a little while, but we haven't been on a full-fledged hike hardly since we moved to the East Coast, and I can't wait to be exploring more trails around here. I personally also, I really love to bake, and I'm kind of a little nerdy. Like I love to read and to sew and to, you know, I play the piano, and I blame this also on my roots. Like I'm a big media person. Like I get it. I'm not like someone who watches film. You know, there's people that are like watch movies, and there's people that watch film. I'm not someone who watches film, but I do enjoy like prestige TV, which is the term that doesn't get used as much these days, but I think is definitely still relevant.
I love it. I love it. That sounds great. Sharalyn, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. This was a fun episode. I don't know if there will ever be another episode where I'll be able to talk about makeup and my skin routine. And all the great things you're doing. This is awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Sharalyn Orr, the Executive Director, Global Marketing Innovation at Estée Lauder Companies. I'm Vincent Petrofessa. That's Ajay Gupta. This has been another episode of The Marketing Stir. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Stir podcast by Stirista. Please like and subscribe. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, please email us at themarketingstir@stirista.com.